So the first step in making a traveller's notebook cover is to decide the size that you want to make. I like my traveller's notebook covers to be quite wide so that I can stuff maybe 6 inserts plus dashboards, etc. into them. So the templates that I've made, they're all made with a 1.5 inch spine. I don't actually put a spine on the traveller's notebook cover that I make. It's just to visualize the width of it to determine what size to make it. So these are the different sizes I've made so far, and in this tutorial I'm going to make an A6 size traveller's notebook. So with my A6 size traveller's notebook cover, I've decided on a width of 10.5 inches and a height of 6.5 inches. So the first step is to cut the paper or card to those dimensions. You can use your template to place on the paper to sort of work out how you'd like the front of your cover to look. So I might just run my cutter along the top of these antlers here and chop them off. That's 6.5 inches high, and I want it to be 10.5 inches wide, so it's just cutting off about 1/2 inch, and I need to just work out which 1/2 inch to cut off. This will become the cover of the traveller's notebook. So the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to decopodge the cover, just because I like the texture that a decopodge gives to a cover, and I just like the feel of a decopodge cover. So these are some that I've decopodged, and I just like that feel. So these ones here also, these are pocket wide ones. These are all decopodged on the outside with leather on the inside. This one has a nice suede on the inside. So these are all decopodged. These three actually are ones that I've printed and then decopodged. You don't need to decopodge them. I've made traveller's notebook covers like this. This is just the Planner Society paper on the outside and some leather on the inside. This one hasn't been decopodged and it's fine. I mean, it has the feel of the Planner Society paper, which is also nice. You can also put your leather on the outside of the traveller's notebook and have your paper on the inside of the traveller's notebook. With some of my traveller's notebook covers I haven't put eyelets on them, and that way I can make them reversible just by rethreading the strings on the other side, then they become reversible covers. So this one has paper on the inside, and this traveller's notebook cover is just the paper and then a suede on the inside. So really it's up to you to design your cover to suit what you would like. So my next step is going to be to decopodge this. When using decopodge, I just like to use gloves, just so that I'm not picking the sealant off my fingers for hours, what seems like hours later. So I like to use gloves just to protect my hands. The decopodge which I use is Pratley Kraftex decopodge, and I apply it with a foam brush. So dip the brush in, get a good amount of decopodge on it, and then just in strokes going from side to side. I'm going side to side as this paper has a wood grain effect on it going from side to side, and so I'm hoping by putting my decopodge on this way the finished result will give a texture of the wood going from side to side. So I'm now just using a wider foam brush just to slowly drag the decoupage from one side to the other, just to end up with hopefully nice straight lines. So that's my first coat of decoupage. So I just put my foam brushes in a plastic bag so I don't have to clean them before the second coat. Just pop the lid on the decoupage and wait. Okay, it's now been 20 minutes since I applied the first coat of decoupage. That coat is actually dry. On the bottle it does say 15 to 20 minutes for a coat to dry. But I have found when I use the matte photo paper, which I use for printing my own covers, that I have to apply a lot more decoupage sealant, which therefore I guess means it takes longer to dry than the 15 to 20 minutes. So now we want to apply a second coat. I'm just going to use a baby wipe just to move the decoupage off the craft mat, because not all of that decoupage is dry. Now we're just going to take our foam brush out of our plastic bag and put on a second coat. For the second coat, I'm going to apply the decoupage in the same direction as the wood grain effect on the paper. So the same direction as before. Usually with decoupage you put one coat, you put one coat in one direction and then the next coat in the next direction, but because I'm going for the wood grain effect, I'm going to apply both coats in the same direction. And just use the larger brush just to slowly go from side to side. And then we'll leave that to dry for about 20 minutes and we'll be ready to do the next step of the process. It's been just over an hour since I applied the second coat of decoupage to the paper and it's now completely dry. So the next step in making the traveller's notebook cover, once you have your paper cut to the size you want, whether or not you decoupage it, the next step is to apply a two-sided heat fusible interfacing. So the heat fusible interfacing which I'm using is a Legacy brand fusible web. This comes in a large roll like this, which we can just cut to the size that we need. So I like to cut it a bit bigger than the cover which I'm making. And then the side that you want to use of the paper you put down and you apply the heat fusible interfacing to this side. Now this Legacy brand fusible web has a paper on either side of the web. So you need to remove both papers. The second paper can sometimes be quite tricky to remove. I found if you make a little tear near the corner of it, it's a bit easier to then lift the webbing away from the paper. I'm just going to take all the paper off and have the web like so. You can peel it off piece by piece. As you can see, it's quite sticky. So I'm actually just going to lay it on the mat. Try and get my thumbs off it. Actually just going to lay it on the mat and then lay the paper on top. And then I'll just turn that over. Okay, I've actually got a little hole in it there, so what I'm going to do is just patch that up a little bit by just applying another little bit over the hole. So that's the fusible interfacing onto the paper, and the next step is to go around the outside and trim the interfacing. Okay, so now we have the paper and the heat fusible interfacing. The next step is to put the leather onto the side and then iron that. So we'll do that now. So on the ironing board I have the inside of the leather facing up. So this is the leather I want to use for the traveller's notebook. I take my paper with the heat fusible interfacing and just place that onto the leather and just smooth it down. There's a little bit of adhesive on the interfacing so that this will temporarily stick. So once you're happy with that, you get a piece of baking or cooking paper and you just pop that on top, and then using an iron on a medium dry heat, just place the iron down on one point of the traveller's notebook cover just for a few seconds. I like to then lift the iron and I just use a few seconds in each spot just to move that along. And what the heat of the iron is doing is making that heat fusible interfacing bond the paper and the leather together. But then just lift the paper off and just check how that's adhering. That looks pretty good. What you can also do is iron it from the other side. So what this is doing is just getting heat through from both sides into that heat fusible in the middle. Okay, so now you can see the two layers are adhered together. So the next step is to cut around the outside. Once you've cut around the outside, it's generally worth just spending a little bit of time just tidying up some of the edges. One step I like to do next is just to round the corners. This is personal preference, whether you want straight corners or rounded corners. The best way to do this would be using a corner chomper, which would chomp through all of this. The way I need to do it is I use this old punch here, and it just makes a mark on the corner, and I then just use my scissors to follow the mark and round the corner. So here we have the cover with its rounded corners. The next step is to punch the holes to thread the elastics through, and then you can have your cover like this or like this. I actually want to attach a spine to this one, so I designed a spine in Cricut Design Space, and I'm going to cut that from the same leather as the inside of the traveller's notebook. I'm also going to attach the heat fusible interfacing to the back of the leather and then see if my Cricut will cut the leather with the fusible interfacing attached, and that will save me having to do this cutting, which would be fine and quite doable, but let's see if the Cricut will do it. This is the piece of leather which I have, and I just want to cut some fusible interfacing to fit the piece of leather. Like so. Now I'm going to put the extra sticky side next to the leather. Like this. And then I'm going to attach the leather to my strong grip mat. I'm just trying to work out where the fusible is, just to make sure. Okay, and we'll make it cut about there, and that way hopefully it will cut through both layers. So here we have my Cricut machine. I'm just going to insert the mat. So my Traveller's Notebook cover is 10.5 inches wide. I'm going to lay this ruler down at 7 inches there, because the spine that I made is 3.5 inches wide, so that should centre it on the Traveller's Notebook. So if we try and get the side of the spine along the ruler and the edge of the spine along the edges. There's a little bit of adhesive on that double-sided interfacing. Okay, so that should be in the centre of the spine with 3.5 inches either side of it. I'll just check the other side. Running up the 3.5 inch line. So there we go, that's that. So what we need to do now is iron the spine so it will heat fuse to the cover. We have the leather and the heat fusible interfacing next to the paper cover. So we just use some baking paper again and a medium dry iron just to heat fuse the fusible webbing that's between the leather. Between the leather and the paper cover. Okay, so there we have it. So we've attached a spine to our cover. So now the cover will look like this. And you can see the leather inside is the same as the leather on the spine. So we have the spine, and the next thing is to attach the elastics. So to do this we need to create holes. So I use my template and I use binder clips just to attach the template to the cover. So there we have the cover and the template attached, and now we make holes where the holes are here. To make the holes I have a We Are Memory Keepers crocodile, and I use the 1/8 of an inch hole, and I have it 1/4 of an inch from the edge. So it's as simple as that. There's the hole. To make the centre hole, if you have one of the long-armed crocodiles, that's an easy process. What I do is I use a hollow leather punch. So I use the 1/8 of an inch hollow leather punch. So I need to have a hard surface. Put the cover on the hard surface and then place the hollow leather punch on the hole in the centre and hammer. Yay! There we go, we have a hole all the way through. So we'll just remove the binder clips, and there we have our traveller's notebook cover with the holes for the elastics. So the next step is to thread the elastics. I've chosen a pink elastic for this traveller's notebook cover. Now, to work out the length I need, it's about 4.5 times the height of the traveller's notebook. So you can calculate that and measure it, or you can just sort of quickly work it out just by zooming up and down 4.5 times. Now I like to heat seal the ends of the elastic before I start. So to do this, I just have a lighter. We've heat sealed the two ends of the elastic. So to thread the elastics, we go up the centre hole to about halfway, and then we get the other end of the elastic and go up the hole beside it, go all the way down and down the end hole, then up the middle hole. We want to go down the middle hole, so we just pull this elastic tight to the edge and try and thread the elastic through the hole, like so. Then we go back through the side hole, back down. Okay, and then we need to go up the middle hole again, so just pull the elastics to the side to try and make the hole as big as possible for threading through. And then we just tie a knot in the ends of these elastics. So you can adjust the elastics in terms of tightness once you get your books in and see how you like it. So now what we need is the elastics to go around the centre. So for the elastic around the centre, I normally measure about the width of the traveller's notebook and add about 1 inch. So I've just heat sealed the two ends of that also, and then we just grab the ends together and put a simple knot in there, and then thread that end through the middle. And there we have it, one finished scallop spine traveller's notebook. Now one thing that you can do if you know that this is in fact the outside is you can put an eyelet in this middle hole, as that's the hole that tends to get a lot of stress on it. So we need to poke the eyelet through the hole, get our hard surface again. So we've got the eyelet through the hole. I've got this little eyelet gizmo that I just bought at the sewing shop. Just make sure the leather's all down around there. We put the little gizmo on this end of the eyelet, and then we just sort of gently hammer it. And as you can see, that sort of sets the eyelet like so. So now we can put this elastic back through, and with the eyelet it can just cope with the stress of being moved around a bit more. So there's the finished traveller's notebook.